Well, good morning. I want to thank everybody for being here today, and especially to Tim Tebow for lending his voice and advocating for the most vulnerable of our citizens. We all know that the internet is an incredible contribution to our society, share photos, information, conduct a business, but it also can be exploited by those who would use it to target and be predators against our children. We know that the child sexual abuse is a epidemic. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children those reports more than doubled between 2019 and 2023. And it's not just here in the United States. No child should be the subject of online sexual exploitation and abuse. Today we're here to introduce the Renewed Hope Act, which would enhance the government's capacity to identify, rescue, and protect kids and bring perpetrators to justice. This bill would equip ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Homeland Security investigations with greater resources and more training and new and advanced victim identification methods. So again, I'm grateful to be here with all of my colleagues in a bipartisan, bicameral effort. And again, want to thank Tim Tebow for lending his celebrity to do good. It's really, really impressive, and I'm grateful to him for that. But I hope this is just the next step in working together to stop online child abuse and to get justice for victims. Richard?
I'm Richard Blumenthal, United States Senator from Connecticut, having spent a good part of my life in law enforcement as United States Attorney, the Chief Federal Prosecutor in Connecticut, as 20 years as Attorney General, as my colleague John Cornyn served as well. And I want to join in thanking Tim Tebow for lending his celebrity to this cause, but it shouldn't take a celebrity to put this measure across the finish line. America ought to be committed, foursquare, fully, relentlessly to stopping the scourge of child sexual abuse material. In the course of these last 10, 20 years of the internet, I have met hundreds of parents, loved ones, whose children's lives have been decimated and sometimes lost because of this scourge. The internet can be a great force for good, but we've seen again and again and again how it can be malignly and maliciously exploited. These images of children, the exploitation of them, and the loss of them is absolutely unacceptable. I just want to give you a few numbers from the global study of what child sexual abuse material actually depicts. 84% have depicted the actual sexual assault of a child. 56% have depicted children under 12 years old, with 4% depicting infants and toddlers. 47% depicted extreme abuse, including sadomasochistic abuse. These numbers are abstract, and they fail to depict the true horror of this crime. Providing resources to combat it, giving law enforcement the tools, the investigators, the actual troops on the ground, boots that can combat this scourge, I know as a former prosecutor, are absolutely necessary to deter and prosecute these cases. We're doing here the bare minimum that we owe our children. to stop this scourge. And I want to thank my colleagues in both the Senate and the House, in both parties, for stepping forward to send a message that we will stand strong. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Laurel Lee, and it is an incredible honor to be here today with my colleagues, with Tim Tebow, and so many of you who are dedicated to ending the abuse of our children. I, too, am a former federal prosecutor and spent much of my career fighting to end the exploitation and abuse of children. And what we stand here to do today is a vital part of ensuring that we meet the contemporary needs of the men and women of law enforcement who are combating these sexual predators. In recent years, the proliferation of child sex abuse materials on the internet, or CSAM, has exploded. The workforce that we presently have is working round the clock to try to find, remove these images, to try to prosecute predators, and to try to protect our children. But they need our help, and they need additional resources. We know through Operation Renewed Hope that when we get a dedicated group of professionals, computer forensic analysts, investigators, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, when these groups join together, they succeed. Their project yielded such important results, and we saw that that collaboration was not only effective, it absolutely identified victims, helped protect children, and is what we need to model for our future allocation of resources. And so we are here today to support legislation that would ensure that Homeland Security investigators have the resources and the personnel they need with the appropriate expertise, and that their partnership with NCMEC and other state and local law enforcement agencies and the FBI can be an effective tool in meeting this increased need, this increased demand, so that we stay ahead of these offenders. It is no accident that today's bill is bipartisan and bicameral. This is something that we all agree on and that we all support. I want to particularly thank Tim Tebow and the Tebow Foundation for shining a light on this incredibly important work. These children that we are here today to advocate for are the voiceless and the vulnerable. And together, the Tebow Foundation and the members here are committed to ensuring that we give them that voice and that we provide the men and women of law enforcement the resources and the tools that they need to stop predators and to protect our children.
I'm Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. I'm also vertically challenged. I want to thank my colleagues, both senators and Congresswoman Lee, as well as Tim Tebow. What you're seeing in front of you is a reconstitution of a team that has come together on both sides of the aisle, on both sides of the Capitol, repeatedly over the last nearly 20 years. I'm proud to be the original author of the Protect Our Children Act, which was legislation where we finally were able to make sure that we put a process in place and ended the siloed nature of how investigations are conducted across the federal government. We put the experts from interagency task forces around the table. We codified the Internet Crimes Against Children task forces into law, and we made sure that they were able to get funded and not have their funding be subject to the whims of politics. We know that there are hundreds of thousands of images across the internet embedded deep in the dark web, and these are not what is commonly known as child pornography in the sense of the word that is normally meant. These are crime scene photos. Every single one of these photos represents and depicts real children who are being horrifically abused. And over the years, we've been able to, Senator Cornyn and I have been able to reauthorize different versions of the Protect Our Children Act and keep it in law, make sure we provided resources to it, and ensure that we even funded the original group of heroes who were retired military, who were veterans, who were trained in forensic investigations, to make sure that we had specialists who were on the front lines investigating these horrific criminal acts, and then had used those tools to be able to go after and find these perpetrators. The Renewed Hope Act is going to allow us to put in more resources, because this does require bodies. It requires brains. It requires human beings, and we have to fortify our front line of investigators who literally are the first line of defense between the perpetrators and whether a child who is being victimized and abused by a perpetrator is rescued or not. We don't have anywhere near the percentage of rescues that we could, because we really aren't putting enough resources or personnel on the battlefield. And having Tim Tebow here, who I've known for many years, all the way back to when he was in college, and the platform that the Tim Tebow Foundation represents, to add his celebrity, to add his clout, and to add his remarkable empathy is so incredibly important. So we're going to get this done, because every time this team comes together, we're able to get this done. Our job has quite literally been to pick up the ball and run with it and move it down the field, pun intended. So that because the more yardage we get, the more children we save. Thank you so much, and I'd like to introduce the great Tim Tebow. Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you so much. It really is such an honor to be here, and not just because I'm standing next to two awesome Gators, but because we're here for something so much more important than a game, and than a game will ever be. It really is humbling. There's a couple people that I'd love to thank, and I'd love to start by thanking Camille Cooper from our team, who has put so much work into this and been a part of fighting for people for a very long time. That was the first clap of the day. Let's go. Yeah, you can loosen up. You can have a little fun with it. And I also want to just thank Senator Cornyn for authoring this bill. Thank you for stepping up and doing this. And Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Senator Blumenthal with Senator Cornyn, I think the three of you guys have, for the last 20 years, done more to help fight and protect kids than almost anybody else that have walked these grounds. And so I want to say thank you. You've done it for a long time. And Congresswoman Laurel Lee, I know your heart beats for these kids. We've had many conversations, and I know that your heart beats to want to protect every single one of these boys and girls. And so it's my honor to be able to stand up here with the four of you, because I know that this matters, that this isn't about policies or politics. It's about people. It is about people. It is about every single one of those boys and girls. It is about how can we possibly get to as many of those boys and girls as possible. So I'm honored to be able to stand up here. You know, 5 months ago, we came and we had the opportunity to testify in front of Congress and share our heart about what we believe is one of the worst evils in the world. And that's the abuse of all of our boys and girls right here in our backyard. And you just heard Senator Blumenthal share some of the staggering statistics, because sometimes people just think, oh, it's a photograph, it's an image, it's a video. No, it's not. It's a boy or it's a girl. It's a little boy or it's a little girl. And we just need to meditate for a second on some of the numbers that he mentioned. 4.3% of those are infants, little boys and girls. That's over 2,100 infants. 47% of them are rape, bondage, torture, bestiality. It's not just images. It's not just videos. It's boys and girls that are in the worst moments of their life, and then people are celebrating it, meditating on it, focusing on it, reliving it over and over and over again. And you think, well, this isn't that bad. Well, I just want to read one of the chats recently of some of the offenders of what they were saying in a chat room. And by the way, this is also filtered, so it can be a little bit more appropriate for today. One of the offenders in the chat asked what the others were into. Next man replied, he was mainly into 5 to 9-year-olds. Another said he was 60 and a very violent man, and no isn't an option for him. One of the offenders then said he has 20 terabytes of baby rape videos, and if they DM him, he would give them to him for a good price. Another offender confirmed and said he would show the others how to abuse his own kids and get away with it. Then another replied he has a daughter that he would love to share. Then the next replied, when asked if his wife knew about his abuse, the man said, heck no, it's our little secret, though I am on the lookout for others, as she is getting old now. Next responded, how old is she? The offender said, 8. That's what we're talking about here today. That's why it's so important. That's why we have to be urgent. That's why it's so important that we're bipartisan. That's why I'm so grateful that all of you would come together to fight for every single one of these boys and girls. And we really believe that we're not just here today talking about one of the biggest problems, but also giving a piece of the solution. Is it the whole solution? I don't think so, but is it a piece? Absolutely. And we believe that this bill, the Renewed Hope Act of 2024, is going to do 4 very crucial things. It's going to build a bigger rescue team. It's going to be able to allow C3 to bring in experts. It's going to allow them to coordinate and deconflict. And then it's going to allow the best victim identification training in all of the world. And why would we not have the best training in all of the world? Because our boys and girls should matter that much to us. I hope that they do, and I believe that they do to the 4 of these incredible men and women. But you know, when I read that chat, it hurts. And I mourn and grieve a little bit when I read it. But I also have hope, because I know that we're being able to bring a piece of the solution here today. And you know, unfortunately, many times, people with the goal to do evil work better than people with the goal to do good. I say that today with a heavy heart. But you know, I also believe here today that people with the goal to do good are working together in an incredible way, and that gives me hope. That gives me a lot of hope today. And you know, I love what this bill is called, Renewed Hope Act of 2024, and I love what renewed means. To give someone the ability to flourish once more. And man, I hope from this bill, from all of these incredible men and women, that there would be so many lives that have the chance to flourish one more, because we are willing to come together, to put down our differences, and to say for every single one of those boys and girls, they're worth it. To do whatever it takes, however it takes, whatever we got to do so that they could be protected, so that they could be loved, so that maybe they could experience the faith, hope, and love that they so desperately deserve and desperately need. Because right now, as we're talking, they're crying. So we better do more than talk. We better act, because they're waiting. Thank you guys so much, and God bless.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, just as we know, this legislation is very important, but you know, those on social media, the social media companies have such a tight grip here on Congress, and they put so much money into this. Other issues such as Section 230 and getting rid of that, and allowing these victims to be able to hold these social media companies accountable. Talk to us about that, and what's the latest on that?
Well, you're right that we are continuing to struggle with what's the right balance, holding the social media companies accountable for not policing their sites. We passed 2 important pieces of legislation and sent them to President Biden just recently, the Children's Online, what do we call it?
Kids Online Safety Act.
Kids Online Safety Act. And
COPPA too.
COPPA and COSA, I think we call them. But the point is, that's really just a down payment on a much bigger problem, because it's not just social media platforms that we need to hold accountable. There's a lot of encrypted sites that are encrypted means of communication where this information is transmitted back and forth that law enforcement can't get into because of the nature of encryption. So this remains a work in progress, and like Tim said, we may not be doing everything, but we are getting started, but we still have a whole lot more work to do. Richard was one of the main sponsors along with Marsha Blackburn in the Senate. Let me ask him to respond.
Yeah, I have a very simple answer, and it's a really important question. And my answer is 91-3. 91-3. That is the margin that we passed the Kids Online Safety Act. Bipartisan, overwhelming support from my great colleague John Cornyn, as well as from the vast majority who not only voted for it, but joined as co-sponsors. 70 members, and still counting, of the United States Senate co-sponsors, despite the opposition of big tech. We can beat big tech. We can win the social media war for decency and children. And the Kids Online Safety Act is a step in the right direction. We're hoping our colleagues in the House will pass it very soon. And Tim Tebow is absolutely right. This bill is also a step, by no means the total solution, but a journey of 1,000 miles begins with those kinds of steps. And we can win against big tech because their goal is money. Our goal is protecting children. People will win over profit.
I would also add that just recently the Report Act passed both chambers and was signed into law. And that was a really critical step toward ensuring that big tech and companies shared information that related to the abuse of children with NCMEC, with law enforcement, and that information was preserved long enough that when law enforcement was conducting investigations and bringing cases, it was there for them. That, too, was a bipartisan, bicameral bill that has been signed into law and is one more step in our fight against the abuse of children.
I do want to point out what we're here to talk about today, though, is in spite of the lack of progress that we would all like to see about holding the social media companies accountable, because we don't have to, we're not at their mercy. We don't have to only rely on the social media companies' willingness to compromise or our ability to move legislation that ensures that we can hold them accountable. This legislation, we can use our appropriations process to provide the resources to pay for the training and the salaries of the actual investigators. The Renewed Hope Act makes sure that we can do all of that, and none of that is related to the grace of the social media companies. It's putting our army of investigators from Homeland Security and the coordination of that effort to go after child sexual predators on the front lines, and literally not doing it with one hand behind our back because we don't have enough people. We need human beings on the ground, making sure, actually in front of the computer screens, with the training necessary to do the forensic investigations, in spite of our lack of progress.
Big tech ought to support this bill.
Yes,
We
that's right.
I think we challenge big tech. Step forward, do the right thing, show where your hearts are. You guys have children, and you know about this scourge. You ought to be supporting this bill 100%. Join Tim Tebow, even if you don't care about us. Join Tim Tebow and his foundation in advocating for this cause.
And Tim, no doubt your celebrity status is moving this forward, and this is just the beginning. But I have to ask, how you deal with this on a constant basis of trying to help out these kids? How do you keep your spiritual class? Your faith is very important to you. Talk about that.
I believe that's a really important question because we do see a lot of evil and we have to fight against it. But I also like the name of this bill so much. I mentioned what renewed means, but I also love what hope means. And we use hope a lot of times in the sense of flipping a coin, I hope it lands on heads. But the biblical form of hope means to look forward with confidence, expectation, and anticipation, because we get to hold on to God's promises even in the midst of disappointment, chaos, tragedy, and hardship. And so, you know what? We want every single kid to be able to look forward with confidence, expectation, and anticipation, because they have real hope. That's what this bill is, that we could give kids the hope that there's someone that is coming after them, someone that wants to protect them, someone that wants to love them, someone that wants to be able to provide for them so that they can can look forward with confidence, expectation, anticipation, because tomorrow can be better than today. And so that's something that I believe my faith helps give me every day, is a hope, because it's based on God's promises, not on flipping a coin.
Well, I think what's important for us to consider today is two things. First is the identification and rescue of children. And that's one of the things that the group of members who are here today and the Tebow Foundation are so focused on, is never losing sight of the fact that these are real children. These are real children in need of identification, rescue. We need to bring them home. Second, as for the offenders and the types of penalties they face, that's something that each state is left to decide for themselves. It's an appropriate consideration for state legislatures.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
So I've got a little bit of lived experience with this being a survivor myself, and some of the groups we work with. One of the issues we're finding is that a lot of particularly male victims are afraid to come forward because there's a stigma attached to male sexual abuse victims. Do you find that to be true, and is there a way that you see of addressing it?
You know, go ahead, Debbie.
I was just going to say, I really just want to make sure that we help people focus on what this bill is about. This bill is about making sure we have enough investigators on the front lines to find the digital footprint of where these photographs are being traded and moved around the dark web, and find the digital footprint so that the law enforcement officers can go and rescue that child who's in the midst of violent sexual abuse. These are young children, down to as young as infants. These are little boys and little girls who don't even have a voice. They're not even at the stage, and I'm so sorry for what you went through. But this is so much sooner than that. The entire focus of the Renewed Hope Act is to go after the bad guys perpetrating this, rescue the children being victimized, and then arrest the perpetrators and put them away for a very long time.
I'd just like to say I'm sorry for what you've went through. I genuinely mean it. I'm sorry. One of the reasons why this is also so important is, how do you tell? I don't know, 9 or 10 years ago, I was sitting with this thought, mourning over it. What do you tell a boy or girl when the person that's supposed to love them is the first person to sell them? What do you tell someone what love looks like when their dad was the first person to abuse them? And it's a very, very hard conversation. And I want to say I'm sorry for what you went through. But there is a lot of boys and girls that are suffering at the hands of those that have been called with the responsibility to protect them. Out of the majority of these studies, it looks like around 80% of those that are abusing these boys and girls are doing it from their trusted circle. Mom, dad, coach, pastor, chaplain, teacher, babysitter. Someone in their trusted circle is doing this. That's also why it's so important, because who do you go to? Who does a boy or girl go to if the person they're supposed to trust is the person that's abusing them? That's also why there is such an urgency with this, because they have no one to go to, no one to ask for help. Well, guess what? Maybe we can give them someone that they can ask for help, because maybe that person is going to show up on their front door. And one of the stories that I want to share from Operation Renewed Hope 1 was a girl that got rescued, thank the Lord. But in rescuing her and finding the perpetrator, they found 8 more kids. And why that's so important is because we know that there's at least 50, and this is just in one database, at least 50,000 boys and girls that are being abused. But we don't even know all of the ones that are behind the camera. We don't even know all the ones that that law enforcement hasn't been able to see yet. And so it's more than the numbers that most people are are studying and guessing on. It's more than that. It's so many boys and girls. And once again, I want to say I'm sorry for what you've gone through.
Yeah, I would join in expressing our sympathy. And let's be really honest, shame and stigma are a continuing challenge. And your coming forward demonstrates a lot of courage and strength. And I thank you for it. The burden should not be on the survivor. The burden is on us. If we fail to provide law enforcement with the analysts, the investigators, the prosecutors they need to stop it, we are complicit. It's on us. We can't put the burden on children to come forward. They're too young. And when they get old enough, they're already burdened by the harm that they've suffered. They shouldn't have to bear the burden of going through reporting it to law enforcement. So I think that it really is on us. That's why we're here.